counts and go in the school, like he's like his concept of life, his philosophy that he's building, like his way he's thinking, the ideas that he may come up with, his chance for development of himself as being a human being is all denied from the day he enters school, because you have educators imposing their philosophies on him. If his mind was developed, or who says like he wouldn't be able to communicate with someone else without any without any technical, like devices. Like, see, the whole concept of communication has lost. The whole concept of living, like humanly, is being lost through the educational institutions, or even not only educational institutions, but through all institutions together. Like, you have billions of government programs go to physical rehabilitation or physical structures, and nothing is to develop a human's mind or see what, or see what the abilities of a human may be at some point. Who knows what the human mind can develop or come up with, what ideas that we have that can be developed. Everything that it has been developed is just an idea. Like television was an idea and it was transmitted. Now, who says that people can't communicate without physical or verbal action, or even, like electronic devices?
Well, Martin, when people do this, then if the facts or the evidence exists that people are able to communicate without this hardware, the whole establishment comes down and says this is not so. It didn't really happen.
Well, I'd like to ask Carroll, as one who has done research in this field. Did you say for 20 years?
Yeah, 30 years, John.
What kind of evidence have you found in the laboratory under scientifically controlled
Well, of course,
conditions?
before we went into the laboratory, we collected experiences that people had, psychic experiences, which corresponded to real events taking place at a distance or taking place in the future, and which they would have no possible sensory knowledge over, such as hunches, intuitions, or dreams, or hallucinations, which would turn out to be true. Now, we couldn't prove that these weren't due just to chance or imagination or overinterpretation. So then we took this into the laboratory, and the classical experiments were done with cards and dice to see if the subjects could guess more cards correctly or throw more dice with the desired face uppermost than you'd expect by chance alone. And in these experiments, we have statistical evidence that indicate that there is such a thing, a real thing, as ESP, or extrasensory perception, and also psychokinesis, control over dice, mind over matter. Now, it would be unusual if some of these spontaneous experiences that people have, it would be ironic if none of them were real, because it was because of them that we were led to perform these laboratory experiments where we proved there is such a thing as ESP.
Carroll, I've encountered reports of all the people who had tremendous ESP abilities, who came to the laboratories, went through the tests and so forth, and indicate that after a year or so they lose these abilities. Is there something in this empirical testing that inhibits or takes away the person's ability? They lose them forever.
Yes, they mostly do. There's one person over in Czechoslovakia who has retained his ability, but he's quite unusual. I think, first of all, this type of testing isn't a normal way of expressing ESP. It's very boring. And ESP seems to be a function of your unconscious mind. You don't have any control over that. At least we have very little control. And your unconscious mind would get tired even before your conscious mind, because your unconscious mind is emotionally immature. And even consciously, you get bored and tired with these experiments. So that is the reason we explain this chronological decline.
Well,
I think something Arthur was saying earlier would indicate, too, that this is an artificial kind of thing and not related to love and rapport and the kind of kinship that existed and the wholeness that existed in terms of earlier peoples and contemporary peoples who are not in this country.
Yes, even when we perform tests of primitive societies, earlier people, they tend to do somewhat better than we do here in the European culture, but not a great deal. But there again is probably because we don't perform the type of tests which they deal with in actual life.
Well, aren't in the traditional cultures, though, I think as you were mentioning earlier, Arthur, isn't there an apprenticeship in these arts that people learn them not in a laboratory, but by working with masters as they go into the tradition?
They call these bush schools, and you're sent into these schools to learn exactly what the religious concepts are, the morality of the villages. All these things are taught to you as a child. And you are taught certain things as a child, and these things are brought up with you throughout your entire life. They could put a mask in front of you and say, this is used in psychology, but regardless of what it is, it works. They could put a mask up in front of a person as a child and said, if you ever lie, this mask will come to life and eat you. And you grow up with this in your mind, that this, if you ever lie, this mask will eat you. And so eventually you grow up somewhere and you go through this business. Someone eventually steals something. Of course, this is something that's very seldom done because those have been very more high moral people. But the reason why the witch doctor, as they are the bush doctor, could detect these people is because all he'd have to do is dance around for a few minutes and do whatever he has to do, and then he eventually puts this mask on and he dances in front of the person. Well, the person has been taught all his life that if you ever lie or steal or whatever the crime is, that this mask will suddenly eat you. We just use that as an example. And he believes this with everything that's inside of him because everyone in the village believes the same thing.
Well, actually, this is a means of maintaining honesty among the people. In other words, where we have an individualistic society where people are figuring how to make a dollar off of somebody else, and the whole thing is based on strategy, tactics, and timing, and so forth, that the last thing that one person wants is someone else to make him honest or find out what's going on in his mind. So that what you're saying says to me that in a culture where you have a real community of people who are brothers and sisters and who live a communal life, that the type of thing you're describing is a way of maintaining this honesty between people.
Right.
John, it seems to me that Arthur is saying something far more general than that, and I would consider it far more important, which is pointing to how mind controls what people do in all sorts of ways, not simply within a particular experience of being correct about some event far off, but in terms of how they act in everyday life. All the things that people tell their children are things that help to create the child who becomes an adult.
Not cutting you off, but most of our prejudices are not really ours. Very few of us really have ever said to themselves, well, what do I want to do? Most people that we know do what the school teacher wants them to do, what their aunt wants them to do, what their mother wants them to do. And this is because they're constantly told from childhood, and these things are inflicted upon the child. And in this growing up in this massive confusion, he never started to ask, well, what do I want to do?
Even when it's self-destructive.
Later on in life, he may do this, but how many of us are lucky enough to arrive at that state where we will question ourselves and say, well, what am I doing in the rat race? What do I really want to do? Very few of us, most of us live our lives and go to our grave living other people's lives, things that have been put into us from childhood. Our youth, they say, especially the thing of racial prejudice, this is taught into children. It is not a thing because you can see that children of all denominations, all colors, can get together and play and be happy. They never think
Not only
of
that, not even thinking about race as a way of dividing mankind.
Not even thinking about it.
It's
Johnny with the blue ball, Mary with the red dress, or whatever.
Right, this one's tall, this one's fat.
Well, Joan, what made me ask that question was that I recently saw a musical comedy produced by a North Philadelphia theatrical group called Wake Up, Man, and Live. And one of the principal characters in this was a person who had psychic sensitivity. I think she was called Lightning Girl. And the beautiful culmination of the whole plot was that through her ability to seek out the secret thoughts and the dishonesties in certain people and confronting them with them and making them get honest, that all sorts of social conflicts were resolved. And I could see that perhaps this was a very deep thing coming out of a more honest type of community culture as perhaps you might have in Africa.
Well, this training in honesty that Arthur describes in the primitive societies might have a psychic element in it. We might say it's just due to conditioning and fear and belief that they're going to be discovered.
Now, I hadn't
Yes, but there was a test performed by Lauscher, an anthropologist, on a witch doctor, or a bush doctor, as you call them in Africa. And Lauscher got this little brown purse, and he got in this automobile, and he drove, about 20 miles out into the desert away from this habitation where the natives lived. And they put a gray rock on the purse, and then they put a brown rock on top of the gray rock. Nobody followed him because he could detect that. There weren't any other cars around. Then he drove back these 20 miles. He went to this witch doctor, Solomon Daba, and asked him to tell him what he had done. And this Solomon Daba then proceeded to describe just how this Lauscher had obtained this purse and put these 2 stones over it. So that was a type of test of extrasensory perception and showed that this witch doctor did have this psychic ability.
Well, as I said, they do train, and the witch doctors, bush doctors, priests, as you may call them, this is taught from father to son, all the way down, from generations and generations. And each one has his abilities, and these things are taught. There are certain ways. I've talked to a lot of African students, and a lot of them they've become a little urbanized now, but they go back and they speak of beforehand, and they said that there were a lot of things that the bush doctors could do, or that these priests could do, that they would not try to, in their sophisticated minds now, begin to explain to us, but they know that these things did work.
Do they have a sense of loss? In other words, do they feel that they would like to regain this
Well,
type
they're
of thing?
confused now because of the economic situation. The European status that these people now are into is based on more so on economics and on religion.
And copying the European standards.
Right, and copying the standards. And as far as the religious concepts are concerned, they haven't really given too much thought about it. It has been a thing that you have to accept and do because colonialism has set up the government and the church and everything. And in order for you to become a good citizen or to be a good person, you must follow this same set of patterns. And now they begin to look down on their traditional cultures because this is not the thing that the state now holds up high. And they're just confused because now they find that the people are interested in their traditional worships and their traditional cultures, and they don't really know where to go, but they do know that in their childhood there were a lot of things that remained unexplained to them. There were a lot of things that they saw that were quite phenomenal from the things that they had taught as Christians, you see.
Well, this is true of many of us here in this
Aren't you
country.
giving another example of how powerful attitude can be? Because the
Mind
attitudes
over matter, right. They have been taught, as one time they used to teach them these matters of the traditional ways of relating to their gods and everything, and their gods were completely different from our gods. But now that has all been taken away, and they're now taught this other God. And a lot of them are very confused and very hurt because the illusions that were painted for them, the pictures that they painted for them, adopting this new religion has not proven to be true. And now a lot of them want to go back to their traditional religion, but the state and everything has set to a degree where they cannot. And yet they still carry with them, deeply inside of them, the fetish religion still remains a part of a lot of these so-called sophisticated Africans.
Well, now these Africans who've gone to Brazil have carried a lot of that culture with them there.
Yeah.
And kept it alive.
And
yeah.
kept it because in spiritualism, for example, is a very powerful force in Brazil.
In Brazil, yeah.
At some of the Brazilian hospitals, as a member of their staff, they will have a medium. And this medium will diagnose and prescribe the illnesses of other patients at the hospital. Now, fortunately, they don't rely on this entirely. They use modern laboratory techniques and methods and substantiate what the medium says. But there must be some value to it, I would assume.
I have read some articles and books on the fact that in Brazil there have been mediums who have performed operations
Without
cutting, or without aesthetics, without any of these things. There has even been witnesses to prove that there was an eye operation, that the fellow just took a pair of plain everyday scissors and went into the person's eye, took it out, scraped something off of the back, and put it back in, dabbed his eye with some cotton, and the fellow...
Because a lot of that is magic and sleight of hand, and there's a famous Philippine surgeon now who's under investigation who claims to have bloodless surgery and to perform operations with just his finger acting as a knife and without actually cutting through the skin. But this is an old-time trick that's been used in all societies, and there's evidence for psychokinesis that mind can control matter in throwing dice and getting the faces to come uppermost, and also in other types of tests where the person will try to get plants to grow more rapidly and not to grow as rapidly.
But this has been demonstrated
This has
that
been demonstrated.
prayer and thoughts of beauty and love do make plants grow more rapidly. And I think, John, your lifelong interest in plants, I think, corroborates this.
I think one of the interesting things, the gentleman who wrote the book called The Power of Prayer Over Plants, he had difficulty getting his works published first in national magazines because hostile thoughts, as I understand it, caused the plants to wither or not grow so fast. And the editors of these magazines thought that this was evil or somehow putting a curse on the plants or something. And something that interests me is the fact that just because a hostile thought has a negative effect on a plant or an animal or a human being, I don't see why this has to mean that it's has something to do with curses or evil spirits. It's just a hostile thought, and I think that this has a
natural reaction to a
Yeah,
hostile
just
thought.
to
Add on to
reaction.
that, you can, children, they say, are the most receptive of people because they're uninhibited. Now, you can, anyone who has children, you can tell that if you and your spouse are arguing and you've had a heated argument, the kids come running right off the street and you haven't said a word, but they pick up the vibrations, and all of a sudden you see them either back down or get quiet and leave out. They feel it. They can feel things. And this
And they
is
actually get sick.
And actually, the mind can transport, and there are vibrations that we do not see, and because there are things that we do not understand. Man's knowledge is limited because man is limited. But there are, each year and each era shows the things that man did not know.
I think this is one of the things that's the heart of the whole so-called problem between professionals and clients, that you have clients of one group, let's say white, who are teachers, social workers, or whatever in a community which is primarily another group, let's say black. And the professionals are always saying, well, the clients won't cooperate, I can't communicate, they won't learn and so forth, and very possibly this very thing we're talking about here, that there's kind of a hostile emanation which is coming out, which the child is reacting
You're
to.
making it sound as though race were somehow basically fundamental as you go around the world.
No, I'm talking about as an
No,
attitude of
where-
mind.
where
a white
racism
attitude of
exists.
mind or a black attitude
Well,
of
I think
mind.
It's
race
surely among
plays-
some people that would be true, but there are
No, but
many
in
people
Philadelphia
from-
there are all sorts of white professionals who just, well, look at the whole educational problem where the statistics show that, you know, tremendous percentage of
find that in
students
our-
are not learning, and they think something's wrong with the students.
I think it's still, you know, like the same thing where, you know, like black people are still at some point has refused to accept this culture. This is why, you know, this is what the whole black thing is about, is change, revolution, change, because like nothing that we do relates. Say for instance, who's to say the potential of a race of people or civilizations of people or civilization of people if like all the electronic devices that abstract their attention or abstract their thoughts from, you know, like deep meditation to other things around them, or what that their minds, or what thoughts that their minds wouldn't stumble across. See, the whole thing is, see, like the way the whole system is programmed is that a human being never has time to develop his mind. His mind is never, you know, like it relaxed. His mind is never wandering or pondering into, you know, like into new atmospheres or new thoughts, or like the whole thing, everything. Say for instance, if a person was home trying to meditate and someone else turned the television on, all right, this is going to attract his attention. He will not you know, like he will fall short of things that that if it wasn't for that television that he would have created. In a way, he could have been almost communicating with another person in another part of the city, but something attracted his attention. And so this is one of the reasons that it was so much development in, you know, like in tribal life and African civilizations, that they didn't have the electronic devices to extract their attention from one thing to another, because this way you're always accepting somebody else's point of view. This is the forcing of somebody else's philosophy on you, and this is the whole thing that the educational system does. It imposes their philosophy on an individual, and this is why Art, when you said the children at an early stage, if they came off out of the street into the house and the parents were having a violent argument, they can sense something is gone, because therefore they have not fully accepted the philosophy of this country, or fully accepted all the other things which go to make them programmatic.
Without denying that there are many, many schools that do attempt to simply impose a particular set of beliefs on the students there, wouldn't you agree that education at its best can be the offering of information which might otherwise be unavailable, and that a student who would be interested in being critical of what he's learning has available to him the tools for criticism? So I think it would be a
This is why
mistake
many
to...
parents want to educate their own children.
But I think it's, I think the problem is not so much education, but the way that we educate our people.
Right.
You see,
That
and
I
I
would
think
agree.
this is not. I don't think anyone has any argument against the values of education. Especially, I'm just an 8th grade student. You know, I never graduated from high school, any of these things. But a lot of the things that I learned let me know how important education is. I have a completely different education from, say, a person who has gone through formal school. But I have talked to a lot of college people. I've talked to all kinds of professors and things of this nature, and communicated with them completely, because I did educate myself, and my education is completely different from theirs. Theirs is academic, mine is informal. But the thing was, I learned a lot that they missed. Yes. Because they are, the way our system is geared. I had my own way, and the things that I know, I really know, and they are part of me forever. And there's no abstract education in my life. Everything that I know is fundamental and basic to help me meet the problems of my real world. Not a world that is supposed or that may come, but my real world.
And not fragmented.
And not fragmented. And this is the thing that we are against. Education is a must. One of the things that's wrong with us, prejudice and all of these things, are based on pure ignorance. You know, if people only understood the finer things of life, the higher ethnics
All
of
have
life,
been projected.
we would not, there's no way in the world that we could go around hating. It would automatically be eradicated if we really had knowledge, but we don't have knowledge. We have facts. And the education is the thing that we must have. And the only thing that I'm sure most of the people against the hippies and all the people, the students in school, is that they have watched generation and generation and generation of this so-called education, and they've seen it lead to chaos. Now they're saying, give us another education, give us an education that will help us not fall into the same pitfall that you people have fallen into. This is why they're tearing up the schools. This is why they're disrupting, because they no longer, they see through, we've become educated to a very high level. I don't think there's been another civilization to reach this age of enlightenment. And this is, even a high school student nowadays has more education than, say, someone who went to school 25 years ago and went to college.
I think even more than that, that the youth is calling hypocrite to the older
They're saying
generation,
hypocrite.
rightly.
It is.
Well, because this is what their education has
preach.
led them to be.
And you know,
Well, also because they have enough of an education to see hypocrisy.
Reality, right. They
Well,
see
I'm saying-
reality, they see the
Yeah.
hypocrisy,
Yeah.
and they are saying now, this education, yes, but another way. And the people who are for the standard way of teaching and who are dogmatic and saying that we've got to do it traditionally this way, they're the people who are really in the way of holding up real progress, because there are other ways to teach. We do not have to do it the way we do it in our public
Right.
school system.
In our consideration of mind over matter, there is a certain amount of background hostility. At least certain psychoanalysts believe that some paranoids have these so-called delusions of persecution because they're more sensitive psychically
Right.
to this background hostility that people have in general towards other people.
And they are, in fact, being persecuted, but they...
Yes, they are. They're more sensitive
Violence
to
is
it.
being done to them, yeah.
Some experiments performed like that were done at McGill University in Canada, where they wounded rats, and they had a healer hold the cage which had the wounded rat, And then they had a cage which was a controlled cage, which also had wounded rats. But the rats in the cage held by the healer, their wounds healed much more rapidly. So this was apparently some action of psychokinesis, of mind over matter, in healing the wounds of the rats.
The thing that bothers me is that it seems to me that in our academic separation of different disciplines, that we have in the laboratory rolling of dice and the reading of cards and perhaps even healing of rats, but somehow no connection is made between this and the fact that maybe 80% of the children in the school system aren't learning, and something must be wrong with them. In other words, why, if we understand what this rapport and empathy and love means, instead of having all sorts of programs which start trying to teach children in the conventional way at the age of 2 or 1 or something instead of 4,
By machines.
why don't we apply what we're learning in your field to the educational field?
Yes,
This is
I
my
think
point.
another illustration of that is a test done by school teachers on their pupils, ESP tests. And the school teacher was the experimenter. And they asked these pupils to rate their teachers to whether they liked the teacher or not. Of course, this was kept confidential. It wasn't told the teacher. And they found out that the pupils who liked their teacher scored above chance on these ESP tests, and the pupils who didn't like their teacher got negative scores. So this shows the importance of rapport or affection or understanding between the teacher and the pupil, that it might be mediated by extrasensory perception as well as by normal means.
I think a person, when you walk into a room, I think there are certain vibrations that you emit, and your body will react to these vibrations. And a teacher, regardless of how much she may say out of her mouth that she's really trying to help and that she really wants to do, nobody really believes, because their body is geared. This is something that I cannot prove, but I'm sure that this works.
I'm quite sure it can be proven.
You know, your body
The shrug of
reacts
the
to certain
shoulders,
things. You can talk to a person, and you can something will tell you that that person is lying, regardless of how much they beat and scream and holler and sweat.
Or how sweetly
or
they
how
say it.
sweetly they may say
Which
it.
is the
You
more
just sit and you
And
look
that's
at them,
distinct at a
and
very
you
early
know
age,
that this
too,
is-
the youth.
And children
Because
is
you're not
special.
been, you know, like
Children
that's
is
in the
special.
educational
And this is
process,
why
you're
I-
not programmed yet.
In the school system, we have people in our education system. We have people who are looking for easy jobs. We have people who are not basically interested in the so-called establishment. They're not interested in their children. They're not interested in anything except, well, I'll get paid whether I teach you or not. And when you have that type of attitude, believe me, those kids will sit there and know that, because they are innocent, they are pure, and you are polluted. And they can feel it when you come into the room. You will always find that regardless of how bad a student is, there is always a teacher that he likes. He feels that person.
But I would assume, too, that teacher learns from the pupils as well, that it's
They
a
should.
mutual
But you see, this is
rapport.
one of the things that doesn't
It
work.
doesn't happen that way anymore,
You know.
because like the teacher, you know, like he thinks
She
because
comes
he
in
has, you know,
dogmatic.
like that degree, that, you know, like he is, you know, like head philosopher, that he has all the solutions to the problems, all the answers, he has all the knowledge. And this is, you know, like this is where, you know, like the thing where you know, like forcing, you know, like somebody else's philosophy on another individual instead of, you know, like giving that individual the resources to develop, you know, like his mind so he can be creative.
I
And this is
think one
whole
of the things that the school teachers must remember is that they are older. The kids, this is their world that we're going to be living in. They will be here. You will die away. You should be able to learn from them as well as teach them what you know. You should not be dogmatic as to say that you know everything because you've been here the longest. These kids are coming up to say, well, I represent something that you will never know.
Furthermore, don't you think that the adults ought to be wise enough and look around and see what a mess we have made?
This is why I say
How
education
they
is
do it like
important.
we
This is
did.
why I say education is important, because ignorance, parents really are the ones who are the fault of the child. You know, you blame the child, but you go back into their homes and you find out what is the parent doing. Either there's too much affection, not enough affection, hostility between the mother and the father, or something that is inherent in the family, that the parent has not really educated that child. He has left the child's education to other people. He has left the child probably alone. He has not really thought about being a parent.
Or
You become a
educated
parent.
him in brutality.
Adhering to maybe a value system which the child senses is not
It's not real.
Right,
The
right,
child
because he
knows
still
immediately.
hasn't went
And
through
the
that
parent
system
is
yet.
saying,
Plus he's under, you know, like the parents are left under the concept through communications that leave education up to the educators.
But
You know,
the
like
parent is
leave
the
it to the
educator.
educators. And like the children are going through school. Can you imagine a youth going to school, going to a brand new school building and going back home to rats and roaches, and he's supposed to come, you know, like continue this process for 12 years, and like, you know, his mind is telling him something different. And you see more and more, you know, like young people falling out of school, rejecting the system. I'm not even talking about the college level or the high school level, elementary, 6th grade level. You know, like anytime a 6th grade class, I'll take a teacher and lock her in the closet, you know, because they didn't like that teacher. And they would react differently. Another teacher, they would walk into the teacher's classroom and go ahead and get their books or sit down and play with a game and do anything that they want to do in that class and still get more out of that class than they would if they were over, you know, like a teacher that's going to project their philosophy on the students instead of letting the students develop their own human potential. Who knows what great ideas will come out of a child's mind when he, you know, like when his mind begins to wander, because at that age he has the time, you know, like to meditate, the time to think. His day-to-day activities is not programmatic, reacting to somebody else, earning a living. He doesn't have these responsibilities, and therefore he has the opportunity to develop his mind in a more so way than to just to be worried about the practical things of life, or the so-called practical things that fall within the system, really reacting to a programmatic system instead of developing his mind.
Don't you think it's something of a crime that children aren't introduced to the excitement of ideas in the school?
Well,
Working on that kind of...
Yeah,
You mean they have
something
the
that I'm
excitement
really
of ideas
interested
that's
in.
taken from them.
That's
I
right.
find that, you know, philosophy, theology, all these things are beautiful. But how old are you when you discover, unless you've gone to college or something like that, that you find out about philosophy and the world of ideas and the occult
And
sciences?
then you don't
and
find
things?
out about it
You
then
don't
in
find out
college.
about it. You eventually you just find out spasmodically on your own. You find it. But if the school system, you know, instead of teaching them these fairy tales that have no meaning, to take the higher philosophies and break them down to an area where kids could understand these things at a very early age,
I
because
would
they're not
approve,
dumb.
even if the school did nothing but stop killing people's desire to learn.
Right.
You get the young kids who want to know. They're asking why, how.
And they will stop. They won't answer certain
And
questions.
they're told to sit down.
Or their
Yes,
own
exactly.
experiences. They're told that their own experiences didn't really happen.
No, but isn't there
If they
something...
just stopped doing that, it would be...
No, but isn't there something deeper operating here which has to be understood politically and economically? Namely that if the schools are to produce people who will perform routine operations in certain factories and offices, you don't want them to be interested in the psychic sciences and so forth. And it seems to me that there may be very well a political economic explanation to this, because if persons develop their full potential of body, mind, and spirit, and including all these extrasensory perceptions and feelings and empathies and so forth, that they're not going to be satisfied to go in this office 8 hours a day.
Well, this is what's happening. This
Do
is
meaningless work.
No, do meaningless work, so that the very culture is based on reducing knowledge and education to kind of a rational shuffling of facts, historical and practical manipulation of our environment. And if this is what is desired to maintain a political economic system, then you're going to have an educational system which excludes all this other stuff. And I think the murder that's performed on people in the, the red, yellow, black cultures, where Christian missionaries come in, for example, and somehow separate people from their culture, and then start having hospitals and things like this and getting them interested in all these facts. And the first thing they've lost this sense of community, and they're just dealing with this material manipulation. And as Arthur was saying, if I understand you correctly, that even in many or most of the African countries, where this reservoir of a whole view of life and a sense of community and a sense of all this way of people being together other than through descriptions and learning facts, that even there, this economic interest in having people work in these factories and offices is resulting in an education there that is depriving us. So that I think that it isn't just a matter of looking at education and saying, shouldn't we have some different techniques? We have to look at the whole purpose of what life is all about.
Well, I think that, to me personally, to answer that, I think the system is geared toward a have and have-not society. It has been that way. To me, it didn't seem like it's going to ever change. that there are the people who will have people working for them and they will become wealthy, and the people who will work all their lives and never get anything from it. Our system is set up that way. Now, are we going to let our system remain this way? We are going to have to come to a lot of confrontations with our system of government, first of all, in order to go into people becoming human beings again. Because we are no longer, most of the things now that people are geared to, they're not interested in the arts, they're not interested in, I mean, you know, things that the people could really be a part of. Everything is geared toward the dollar. The arts are now geared toward the old American dollar. Economics has overridden everything, and you cannot live by bread alone.
That's what I was going to ask you. Wouldn't you say that this have and have not depends on have what?
Yes.
Because surely there are plenty of very wealthy people who have not much of life, at least in the estimation.
They have a lot of money, but that's about all, and they will give their right arm or half of their money away if they could find some kind of spiritual contentment. And then there are people who are spiritually content and don't have a dime.
You know, it seems to me that the type of work that you're doing, Carroll, and Dr. Ryan and others in studying ESP in the laboratory almost is damning this with faint praise. In other words, you take the whole system. You have one section over here where you're kind of going to deal with ESP and everything as though it were sort of, you know, something a little far out. And the very fact of the type of studies that are being made prevents the total culture from facing the fact that it has eliminated this from a central position. And
although there are increasingly large numbers of psychologists and sociologists, myself included, who are quite committed to the idea that unless you encompass the value systems of people, the ideas they have, you cannot possibly understand what a person is doing.
No, but you see, what I'm concerned is the fact that even though in our separated disciplines, persons such as yourself are attempting to synthesize them and perhaps pull them together, that my guess is that it's going to take a traditional society, a traditional culture, which has never lost this, that somehow has got to resist the encroachment and have this whole view and be a source for restoring a whole view. And so that's why I'm particularly upset to hear what you're mentioning about even in many African countries where this sense of communal life, which we are all looking for here, is somehow even there being destroyed. And do you see any conscious efforts of groups to try to restore and preserve and, you know, as a renewing force for the whole world, try to spread this whole view which, you know, sees all these extrasensory ways of people having community?
I find a lot of individuals who are looking for a headquarters. I find this. There are a lot of people who have come to basis with themselves and they know now that what has to be done. But now they're trying to find a leader as to do this thing spiritually. There are a lot of people, but in every country you'll find this, you know, that there are certain people who are broken away from the system. There's surveys and statistics now to show that there's something like 77 million people in this country who don't go to church anymore because the system has failed. The education system, the kids are tearing it apart. The churches, nobody's bothering to go anymore. They're falling apart. They now become political entities instead of religious entities now. You see? And but yet, what happened to all these people who drop out of churches? They don't all go into bars and become alcoholics. They don't all go into dope and become dope addicts. There are a lot of people who are now, this is why the gurus of India, and people are looking for spiritualist people, and this is why astrology has become so rampant now. Everyone now knows what sign they are. They're trying to find something tangible to hold on to that is real, because at least they know now that the Christian theory that we have put forth, not saying that Christianity would not work, but the way that we have set it up, that it isn't working, and if we don't soon come to some kind of grips with it, it's going to destroy the whole world. Now, Christianity was supposed to unite, but what has it done? It has separated. And as you look around the world and you see where the Christian missionaries have gone, that they now have problems that they never had before. But the Christian missionaries come and say, we are right. Now, just take Africa, for instance. You can find where these people have now become Christians. There are more Christians all over Africa now than there ever has been. But also you find more juvenile delinquency, more prostitution, more stealing and theft and murders, all these type of things which were not a part of the traditional African culture. They just were not. And there is proof to this, that these things were not a part of the system. But now with the thing of you become the Christ, you know, you become Christian and that's enough. And the latitude of laxativeness that's in Christianity. It just isn't enough. And there has to be things that that will hold people together. And going to church, letting some minister, stand up there and say what he has to say, and you say, "Thank you, Reverend," and get up and go. That is not it. This is why you were saying downstairs about dance being separated from religion. There are certain parts of the things that dancing does for you that no amount of sitting down listening to someone preach to you will do. And dancers have now gotten, they know, every dancer who dances knows that there's a certain spiritual release that you get that nothing else will give it to you. Nothing.
Other people get it from looking at the stars at night, which are particularly beautiful on that day, or walking through the woods as the flowers are.
But we find that
communicating with another person on a very deep level.
Well, I find that most psychiatrists say that if you have a good friend, you don't need a psychiatrist, because you can sit down and talk to your friend, you see. But most of us have become so away from it because we don't think of that anymore. We all think about how we're going to go to work tomorrow morning and how much are we going to get raised, or when is the union going to do, my union do. This is what everyone is talking about now. There are so many of us, rather, are talking about. But this is what we must get away. The younger generation doesn't see this anymore. The hippies are a typical example, and I like to really speak on these people because they have been named everything under the sun, and they have been talked about ridiculously. I realize what they're doing because being black and living on the fringes of society, I can identify with them. These people, these hippies, they are usually come from very wealthy families. Their parents give them money to go away, to stay away from them. And these people are rebelling against their families because they say, "Mother, you are rich, you are wealthy, but you are also miserable. So money is not the end item to life, and we want to find out what is the end item to life." And this is why they rebel against everything that we set up traditionally, as the establishment sets up. They rebel against it because they say, "I don't want to be a part of it because look what it would produce in my mother and father."
Don't you think that gives them independence?
You must have independence, and we have lost this. We sit around and we let everyone think for us, and we become dogmatic in people's thinking. We will not allow a person to sit and think and do, as they say, do his own thing. And in order for you to realize your full potential, you must be able to do your own thing, whatever it is, to find out whether you are right or wrong, and how that particular thing will fit in with the society.
But these kids have had the courage to say to their mothers and fathers or whoever holds the purse strings, "I don't want what you're right," and
I don't want it.
That's giving them the right to
live on nothing.
Well, Carroll, in terms of the research undertaken by yourself and your colleagues, do you envisage this as being on the road to restoring an essential part of human life and culture, which may have a renewing effect on our whole society, or is it largely regarded as some sort of peripheral phenomenon which is interesting, which is kind of being explored as part of total knowledge, but isn't really a dynamic for renewing society?
The basic question is, are we evolving ESP or are we losing it?
Right.
Henri Bergson's theory is that primitively we had perfect ESP ability, which was a handicap to us, because we wouldn't be able to distinguish between a tiger in Africa and an automobile here in Philadelphia as to which one might kill us.
Why not?
Because the tiger, well, we would perceive them both through ESP, and we wouldn't know which one was where.
But danger is perceived through ESP.
Yes, but the tiger wouldn't be dangerous to us if it's over in Africa. So we developed a brain and sense organs, and the brain filters out ESP.
Fragment.
And so that we only get information which is immediately around us. Now that's one hypothesis. The other hypothesis is that as we evolve, that we develop this psychic ability, and that we have it more, say, than lower animals do. Because these experiments where man affects a plant or man affects a rat may be just that. It doesn't indicate that the rat or the plant has any particular psychic ability.
But they may affect us, and we are not aware of this interrelatedness. You see, the concept that there are lower animals and that we have more, quote, intelligence, more ESP ability, more mind potential, and so forth, limits our being able to explore just what our potential is. By setting human beings, quote, up as superior to all other living creatures, we lose sight of this interrelatedness between us and everything else that's living, so we can't tell who we are.
Any question that we have a superior intellect over a rat.
Well, what about a dolphin? There are people who would hold that a dolphin has an intellect at least the equal of of human beings. And certainly the mass killing that we do would indicate that something's deficient about our
And I would say we are more intelligent than the other animals because we just don't live in their world. They have knowledge that we'll never know.
I mean, they
we have a knowledge.
survive.
They could care less about what we do. They could care less. But these animals, they have a world that is completely this. If you take any animal and dissect his life away from every other animal, you'll find out that he has a civilization and a way of living all his own. And you could set that same pattern against what we're doing. We have a set civilization and a set pattern as men. A roach has his own way of life, an ant has his own way of, and all of this, you see the bees and everybody, they get together and they have their commands, they have their soldiers, they have their everything. I don't think that we are so high. We're just living in another level.
Well, in
Yes,
terms
is there
of
any
man,
particular way of comparing it?
Right, but in
I would
terms
agree
of
with
man, even, I don't see why we have to have a theory of progression or regression. Why can't we say, and of course, this comes out of, let's say, my ecumenical bias, if you will, in terms of Wellsprings' approach to try to be open to everything, not only at the present time, but through all of history, that isn't it possible that the total human potential contains both these psychic abilities and, let's say, the rational, scientific, empirical method things, and that the real problem is not to decide whether we're moving from one to the other or from the other to one, but to look at the total spread of human potential and see if we can't build a life based on all of these elements and relate to animals and
I
plants and
think
the
our
whole
real
universe.
problem is that
think,
the
John, one
psychic
thing
part
would
has been
see-
neglected.
Yeah.
You say
Well,
the psychic
certainly.
part we had
Right,
neglected.
right.
We're living
and we-
purely on a rational stage.
Well, we've been conditioned to neglect it.
But when
Yeah.
as we develop and as we live in this society, we lose,
More and
like
more,
that
more
of what
and
we
more.
have of, like of any of thing so-called phenomena, which is not a phenomenon, is really, like is a part, like it's a part
Every
of the
child
human
is
being.
born with this potential,
And it's
right.
everybody's born with it, but we lose it as we, like go through the process of, the so-called process of the education. We lose this. It's not that the person, when he grows older, he develops it. As he grows older and living in a society such as this, he loses it.
It's like whittling away at a piece of wood. Each piece you chop off makes the wood a little bit slimmer.
Right.
There's
Right.
no
Well, then how do we
individuals, and I think
humanize this
individuals
society?
are the ones that hold the world together, and we don't know how many people we stifle by gearing them. You go to school, all of us have been to school, and you sit and you just remember your classroom. How ridiculous it was to sit there and try to learn something in those hard, uncomfortable seats, but you could not sit a certain way. It was just miserable. And all these things that come, and they're trying to teach you, and the things that you at that early age you're not interested in the first place. But yet this is why they tell you that this is educating. This is your education, and you must sit there in that hard seat in that stuffy classroom and learn. Why
Not
is
to
that
that?
even
mention
in the
Sunday
attempt to
school,
show-
where there's
Yeah.
supposed to be a
Right.
corner on the spiritual
I mean, what's
education.
happening at Harvard now, teams of students are going into these lecture courses and they're breaking them up. In other words, they're saying that just to sit there and have the professor have this lecture course, and you have 150 people sitting there taking notes. I was just talking the other day to a department head up in Harvard, and they're now, all the classes, students are coming in and breaking up these lecture classes.
Yes, but they're outside people who are depriving those who already are devoted to learning from the right to learn from these things.
Depends on what you call learning, you
No,
see.
but they don't. They claim it isn't learning.
Alex Incolas, who was the most recent break-in, happens to be one of the teachers who, at least when we were up there, was highly popular by those who want to learn this way. That doesn't have to mean that everybody wants to learn by the same technique.
No.
But the deprivation of the right of some people to learn, it seems
No,
to
but
me
what
not
happened-
a
Why
movement
No,
have
but
an
his
institution
course
at
is-
all? Why have an institution at all? And who says, like the day is better than the night for, like studying or reading or learning anything? Why should, like we go to a special
Different
place to learn how to write?
Well,
don't
a
need
special
to.
person can be the
Oh, a
only one
special
from
person.
No, but you see-
I quite agree with you,
And-
but to refuse to let people who want to learn in a particular way
Yes.
from learning
If
seems
they're
to me moving the wrong direction.
But this
But
is
this
what
is-
has been happening, Joan, all along. People who want to learn in a whole way have not been allowed to do so, and now they are asserting themselves and saying, we want to learn in a whole way. They
there's
have been
only one-
deprived of it now.
The thing is
Right,
that there's
but
only
you
one
don't
way
need
of
to knock
learning.
the other team out just because they've been the only one in the field
How else
before.
you gonna
I'm
do
for
it?
Well, let me
people
say this,
determining
How else
their
you
own
gonna do it?
One
destinies.
wonderful way is to encourage self-education, to quit
Right,
talking so
right,
much
right.
about
Thank
what
you.
it means to have a formal
Yes.
education.
Right.
Another possible way is these street corner schools, some of which are magnificent, because the people who are teaching in those schools want to teach.
But let's say through self-education, you're at Harvard, and you see that the lecture framework is very limited. And you realize that in order to get a passing grade or maybe get a scholarship or get a job, all these things, you're going to have to feed back what the lecturer tells you, you see. I don't think you'd have to leave and then just try to self-educate yourself. I think one of the things that you can do out of your concern is just try to break up this whole method, which is making everyone kind of, you know, enslaved to a certain teaching method, and get some real freedom of discussion and dialogue and exchange of ideas. And
I personally don't use the lecture method because I find it, on the whole, much duller. But I am one who loved the lectures when I heard them and would fight for my right to listen to them.
Right. Well, I think you would have
Well,
both
you know, what
opportunities.
I think is this, that there is just only one system, and this is what is wrong. So for those people who are geared, say, like you say, you could go to a lecture and listen. Well, that's well and good. Everyone is incapable of doing that.
Right.
But why can't there be another alternative for you to go to a lecture and these people who are not geared to a lecture to be able to go and learn that exact same thing on a much less formal level?
Right.
You see, but we don't have that decision to make. It is do it this way or forget it.
Yeah,
And
and to
you
get
have
this,
to have
as they say,
certain
we have different
credentials.
strokes
To
for
get a
different
job.
folks, you know.
Yes, but
And this
I
is
think
the
we
way
ought to
it
be
has-
careful to fight the right thing, and I
Yeah.
agree with you. It's to fight the rigidity with which the system controls
Right.
everything.
But you have
rather
to
than-
fight to free yourself and to liberate yourself in whatever area you find yourself, because I'm sure that both of you had to produce certain credentials to show that you had been through certain academic exercises in order to be able to teach in the universities.
Right.
Why are the universities then only open to people who have been through a certain set of credentials if you are implying, and I think we all are, that learning is not dependent upon these things, that real learning is not dependent
Well,
upon it.
Drexel at least is recognizing that and not always insisting in that anybody they hire be through the credentials. Furthermore, there are individual people who are objecting to the lecture technique and trying experimentally other forms of
Well,
teaching,
blindness is also part of the new
but without
renewal.
having either the power or perhaps not even the will to say, I'm going to knock the whole system over. They're
And let's-
trying.
Oh, well, you could turn yourself around.
Right.
Another thing too, you know, in getting to your mind, you know, when you walk into a school building, you just see nothing there warm and inviting. Everything is so cold and rich. There's no color, there's no softness, there's no atmosphere, there's no warmth. It's just this cold, hostile air. And you learn your better things at home.
Well, are there
Because you
certain
can
places?
relax.
Well,
The
education
mind
should be
is-
everybody's
you see,
job.
and this is what I mean. Why do we have to? Why does everything have to be so set and rigid? This is it's produced zombies, and we have stopped living now. In my capacity as a dancer, I'm opening up because I feel these things and I know this and I want to help. I've taken my place that I have for dancing school, and I'm going to turn that into the type of learning institution that I think it should be for everybody. It's on Germantown Avenue. I call it the Black Humanitarian Center because we're not interested in white or black. We're interested in human beings and how can we do something to break down this thing of both black and white and the dollar and so forth and so on. Why can't we do something that's a little different with there's some warmth and some understanding and like let me just come in and find my way into this thing. And this is what we're doing. I'm doing with the center there. Opening it up to, we have lectures, we'll have films, we'll have everything, but it isn't on a formal basis at all. It's just you come in and you sit anywhere you want to, you do what you want. If you want to read, you read. If you want to write, you write. If you want to listen to the lecture, you can. If you don't, you know, go drink coffee or sit around, do whatever you want to do. Because this is how you really learn. A person has to do what he wants to do. How many of us grew up to be what our parents really wanted us to be? Or how many of us really listened to everything that our parents said? They sat there and they told you and they screamed and they hollered, but yet and still we kind of sat and listened and held back and still became what we wanted to. We may have left home to do this, but we eventually ended up being what we wanted to be anyway, regardless. Me personally, and this is how I base all of my knowledge, is on myself. If I had listened to my parents, I would never be what I am now. I would have been somewhere in a factory, someplace working, or sitting behind a desk someplace with a government job or something, and just another nobody, you know. But because I maintained my own individual mind to go against everybody who told me, give that up, you should leave that mess alone. Like I said, I've been doing these African dances for 10 years. Now, what caused me to go into this? Something came and said that this is important and do this and stick and stay. Now, I don't question what that was and what made me do this. All I know is that I did it and I stuck, and it's starting to pay off.
No, Arthur, you talk about the mood of a place
Right.
for learning and for
Right.
love and for communication between people. It's very important because some of the things that you've been trying to study in the laboratory can't be studied in the laboratory, can't be understood. A prison has a mood, a sense about it, a feeling. There's certain houses that people, you know, express there's a feeling about, and there are institutions and factories that are not made for people, they're made to fit people into them, and they have a mood and a feeling all their own, which I'm sure, you know, people sense through something besides, you know, taste, touch, smell, and sight. And that can't be studied.
Matter of fact, educational institutions are no different from prisons. If you actually look at it, right from the time that the student, you know, like enters the building and he's under, you know, like the direct, you know, rulership of a dictator.
And police in the halls.
Right, and police.
No, but I think this is why in the traditional cultures where you had nomadic peoples and you had gypsies and you had all sorts of people circulating through society, that they were the ones who weren't constrained by these institutional setups, and they were the ones who could maintain these psychic arts and feelings and this whole thing. And maybe there's a possibility, as well as Harvey Cox pointed out in the Secular City, that now we're getting nomads within our cities again. And we're getting people who are not going to get geared into this institutional thing. It's gotten so big that you're going to get a flow and a circulation of people doing things like you are, doing things like the hippies are, and maybe this is the biggest hope for reuniting body, mind, and spirit, and getting these lost, truly human psychic capacities which we need to establish community.
You make it sound occult, so that my own orientation is to say, well, wait a minute, some of us adore beauty in the sense that a field that's suddenly covered with water from the rainfall gives us a better feeling than we had before. We listen to
no, but that doesn't happen in a building. You see, that's my...
Or it might happen if you appreciate architecture. You suddenly notice the way the ceiling has been placed because the beams have been so beautifully planned.
No, but you're in this room for 9 months sitting there listening to this lecture. What I'm saying is if you have people circulating around and getting a cup of coffee now and dancing now and reading something and talking, and that this sort of thing seems to me has a liberating effect. And that if we have enough people who don't go this institutional route, but who live life in this way, we may regain the very lost psychic aspects of living, which are going to be the answer to the fragmentation which has come from our institutional life.
I'm only suggesting you can get this through music, through pointing out what is beautiful, and through stopping the kind of constricting.
No, not only through music, but, you know, like to just plain being creative, you know, like having the freedom to be or to develop your mind at your will. It's very important that an individual develops or feel, you know, like has the motivation or the stimulation or from within, you know, like to decide to develop or to, you know, like decide I'm going to be a lawyer or I'm going to be a doctor or I'm going to, like, if I'm going to be a street sweeper, you know, like he should be motivated to be a street sweeper, but be a good one. And like that's the thing that the whole educational system process has denied, is that you don't want to go through school and be a street sweeper, do you?
You're right.
You know,
they say these are the good things and these are the bad things.
If a man wants to do this, if an individual wants whatever he wants to be, you know, like let him be that. And just give him, you know, like the moral conscience, you know, like to treat other human beings, everybody, not, you know, like the street sweeper is just as, you know, like much as human as a doctor or lawyer or a politician, you know, just give him, you know, like bear the same respect for that individual that you bear for another, and let everybody, you know, like have the free choice to develop or to be what he wants in life. And then, you know, like all these things, you know, like extrasensory perception, none of these things will be phenomena, which they really aren't phenomena. It's just, you know, like it's phenomena against, you know, like the adult educators, because, you know, like they have created dialogue which youth cannot use and communicate to the adults, this dialogue that they have created for defining certain things. So, like, they cannot tell us about their experience